Joshua Van versus Tatsuro Taira. Taira had some very good takedown attempts, but the moment that Taira got him to the ground, Van just shut down Taira's ability to do anything, got back up, and then won the battle on the feet. Gaethje versus Topuria. While they were both strikers, the fact that it's, two strikers contending for the lightweight title, which is one of the deepest, most competitive pools in the entire UFC, speaks to how big striking is these days. Strickland versus Chimaev. Hell, even Yan versus Dvalishvili could be said to be an example of how strikers are consistently winning in the UFC. While Yan did use a lot of grappling, Merab relied a little bit more on grappling, and while Yan was doing a bit better when it came to the on-the-feet striking, and that managed to give him the victory. I could go on, but you all get the point. These days, strikers are doing very well for themselves in the UFC. I'd really say the only current UFC champion who I would confidently say relies to a very large extent on grappling for his victories is Islam Makhachev. And, even then, he had something to contend with in Ian Gary, who was mainly a striker. The people who say that Ian Gary won, which I think they're kind of stupid for saying that, but even they don't say that Ian Gary was winning the grappling, but they try and argue that he won the striking and thus won the match. He also didn't win the striking, but striking was a big decisive thing, even in that match, even for Islam Makhachev. This stands in stark contrast to the previous era, for instance, in the times of Khabib, in which grapplers tended to win more often than strikers. Yes, strikers weren't just completely raped up and down the line. Being a striker was always a valid strategy, but strikers weren't nearly as successful as they are these days. To a large extent, this is caused by strikers having adapted their styles to modern grapplers. They've built up their takedown defense and their takedown recovery. Van versus Taira and Strickland versus Chimaev are both good examples of strikers who've learned what to do after they've gotten taken down and handling things very well. Taira's attempts to submit Van, none of them really even got close. As well, strikers have gotten much better at using strikes to shut down takedown attempts in the first place and force grapplers to stand and bang with them. It also should be noted that there have been rule changes that have shifted the balance somewhat in favor of strikers. For instance, fairly recently, the rules were changed so that control time really doesn't give you much of an advantage when it comes to how the judges score the round. So you can't just be a lay and pray grappler, as they say. You can't just take a guy down, sit on him for 3 minutes, and then win the round. And I'll clarify that I'm very much in favor of these rules. I personally am a grappler, but that doesn't stop me from being bored when somebody just shoves a guy against the wall and just sits there for a million years and does nothing. Back in the days when grapplers dominated MMA, people generally tended to think that it maybe just grappling was generally a superior strategy when it comes to fighting in a very wide open rule set. Nowadays, now that the balance has swung heavily in favor of striking, I say that that doesn't necessarily prove that the opposite of that is true. Rather, it simply points to how strikers have adapted because they were already forced many years ago to adapt to high-level grapplers who were beating them left and right. But grapplers were not until recently ever forced to adapt, and grapplers are nowhere near done adapting to the new striking meta. Grappling styles have remained significantly unchanged in the face of striking. Yes, you mix in the grappling with the striking, but grappling has not changed as much in the face of striking as striking has changed in the face of grappling. And because, striking these days is better fine-tuned to deal with grappling than grappling is fine-tuned to deal with striking, strikers are beginning to win. But I think that this is going to change once grapplers basically do the same thing that strikers did and adapt to striking. And I don't necessarily think that this will mean that grapplers will suddenly start dominating again. I think a sort of equilibrium will be reached between grapplers and strikers who are every single year becoming more and more the same thing. As strikers build up their takedown defense and even learn how to work in takedowns themselves and build up their ground game so they know how to recover, sometimes even sweep, they're not just learning how to deal with grapplers bit by bit, they're becoming grapplers. And the grapplers who are fast adapting, such as Islam Makhachev, who are learning how to deal with strikers, how to stand and bang, what to do when they can't take people down. They're not just learning how to deal with strikers, they're becoming strikers. I think the era of the specialist fighter is rapidly dying out. As time passes, more and more so fighters are not just becoming grapplers who can strike or strikers who can grapple, but true mixed martial artists. People who do everything. Being a truly mixed martial artist has already proved to be a very successful strategy for many fighters. Islam Makhachev has used striking to his advantage. He literally knocked out Volk. Justin Gaethje definitely prefers to strike, but he set up his strikes very well by using grappling, by threatening to go for knee taps and such in his fight against Topuria. And Ilia Topuria is kind of the poster child of a guy who is an incredibly mixed and well-rounded fighter. He does like to strike, I think, a little bit more than he likes to grapple, but he does everything together so seamlessly that you can't really say he's a striker or he's a grappler. Ilia Topuria is a real honest-to-God mixed martial artist. Of course, this has its limits. Everybody has their base sport. It's pretty difficult to just jump straight into MMA without any prior experience, and styles will always exist. People will always be at least a bit specialized, and this is great for MMA. As they say, styles make fights. But people are beginning to move toward the center.